Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome, everybody, to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. On today's show, we'll be revisiting the Scott County letting out illegal immigrants story. We have some updates to that, where politicians are showing us, one, I was 100% right, and two, an important example of how politicians seek to muddy the waters when they don't like the facts. We'll be digging into that. Also, we have Beshear spending on the WEF form that he spent on that trip of taxpayer funds. Also a trip to Spain. We'll be taking a look at those expenses, how ridiculous it is, and how it points to where Beshear is at in his political future, because he just doesn't care what Kentucky truly thinks about him. We've seen a spike in far-left protests and membership spiking in Democrat socialism in Louisville. We'll talk about why and what it means for our futures. And then finally, we'll dig into a interesting spending line I found where Kentucky is paying Texas Instruments $16,000 to receive 10 days of training on the TI-82 calculator. That's after a 50% off discount. 10 days of training to learn to use a calculator that came out, I believe, in the 1990s. We'll dig into why this is a ridiculous waste of spending on many different levels. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, do all those things if you're listening on a podcasting platform where you can leave a review. Please do so. Also, make sure you're sharing the show with others. But without further ado, let's dig into it. Now, those of you who who listened to my last episode, it was a video episode, of course, if you're listening to this for the first time on the podcast platform. That was the last video episode I had. And one of the stories I mentioned in there was about Scott County. Scott County had been, up until November of 2024, releasing illegal immigrants who had been convicted of the crimes, served their sentence of the crime, and then they had an ICE detainer on them. They, instead of honoring the ICE detainers and holding them for ICE or the federal government to come pick up, instead they were just releasing them back into Scott County. So Scott County was literally getting criminal, not just like criminal in the sense that it's criminal to even come to America in the first place. And I understand that is something some Democrats struggle with, but other criminals than just being here, like committed crimes while here illegally, individuals that they just released, just right back into the general population of Scott County. And so I'd posted about that on social media as well. What I had said here was the Kentucky Scott County jailer, Darren Boyles, admits that up until a few months ago, they've been releasing convicted illegal aliens back into the community because the county attorney advised them to. Jailer Boyles said that County Attorney Cam Culbertson advised them to release the criminal illegal immigrants because of a risk of lawsuits. After calls from the community, the jail has changed policies. They now transfer convicted criminals with an ICE detainer to Oldham County. It's always infuriating when you see elected officials just say, oh, well, when faced with a problem that individuals in similar situations have been able to resolve. Even more infuriating when it gets solved after they realize they may lose their elected position over it. And my point there is simple. It's exactly what I talked about on my last show. That it's weird that there have been other counties that have figured out how to get these illegal immigrants and transition them in. ICE detainers exist for a reason. If it was truthfully such a great risk of lawsuits for you to hold on to illegal immigrants when requested to by the federal government, the ICE detainers wouldn't exist. Nobody would ever do it. However, a place does it. They've been set up to deal with it in Oldham County. And magically, once citizens realized what was going on and they reached out to Darren Boyles at the Scott County Jail, he found a resolution. Now, he had priorly been blaming, saying, hey, look, County Attorney Cam Culbertson's at fault here. Now, from that story, it's up to you what conclusion you want to draw. One, Jailer Broyles saying, oh, well, I can't solve it because he didn't bother to look into it anymore. than whatever the county attorney told them. So he's like, look, it's the county attorney's fault. He's the one who told me. Or you could blame the county attorney for giving that advice instead of digging into it himself. It depends on how you want to blame the blame here, right? Now, the resolution, what ended up happening is that the a fiscal court made the deal with Oldham County to take it. And so that deal needed to be put in place. But it hasn't been for like years. So whose fault is that? Is it the jailer's fault for not bringing it up? Is it Cam Culberson's fault for giving that advice to the jailer without bothering to follow up? And how did they arrive at this conclusion? And the entire point of my segment on the last show was about how these unelected, not even bureaucrats, but individuals who are on these professional boards and licensing end up changing policy. Because I said, in this case, I didn't even need to research it. And I admit it, I didn't research this at all. But I guarantee you that what happened here is the county attorney or the jailer, one of the two, but most likely county attorney because the jailer's already blaming the county attorney, didn't actually bother to go research the law, didn't bother to go out and figure out how do we solve this issue? How do we come to a conclusion and a resolution that doesn't involve releasing criminal legal aliens back into our community? Instead, they just took whatever some association for county attorneys or whatever told them. You know, they got some newsletter sometime that was said, hey, don't hold illegal immigrants, you're risking lawsuits, and said, okay, well, that's now my advice. And no one bothers to look into it. I use this example, during COVID, doctors didn't look into the data when it came to their, the vaccines, of course. And this is just a real problem of individuals who are so-called experts that hold themselves out there as experts, the people who are to answer the questions that they themselves don't research it for whatever reason, busyness, laziness, whatever you want to call it. And instead they turn to professional organizations. Those individuals within the professional organizations get to shape the policy. So I in fact, in the last episode, I specifically said, I bet you $1,000 this is exactly what happened. Well, if any of you took that bet, you lost, okay? Because Cam Culberson responded to this post that I made on Facebook and confirmed a lot of things. Before I dig into what he said, there was a comment on the Twitter post that I want to draw attention to of why this is so important. This is why it's so important. And this comes from an individual here who said that it is very difficult for them to read what I just posted here. That's very difficult for them to read. While this is hard to read, my dad was murdered in Scott County by an illegal immigrant in 2015. He'd been arrested 8 times prior, aliases used. They're talking about the illegal immigrant here, and had an ICE detainer that was ignored. So this is a very direct result of this supposed policy of not holding people on ICE detainers. This individual's commenting saying their father was murdered by an illegal immigrant who shouldn't have been here. And if they were held on their ICE detainer and if it wasn't ignored by Scott County, well, their father would still be alive, potentially. That's a pretty hard-hitting story. This is how these types of decisions have real-world consequences. I've ran for office several times. Many of you are aware of this. And one of the things when I was asked why I ran, and I was asked this at a event one time, like, why do you run for office? Why do you care about politics? And I said, because, when I went through what I went through with COVID and just became a little more public and had the opportunity to talk to a lot more elected people, I discovered something. So often, they forget that their decisions and policies have real-world effects. Sure, they may see the good side of what they decide. They may decide, oh, I'm going to take this person's money and give it to these people in order for them to pay their rent or buy food or whatever. And they say, oh, pat me on the back. But then they miss out on the fact that them taking money from those who it rightfully belongs to and giving it to someone else, you're now causing that person to be unable to maybe buy a home or be as financially well off or not be able to send their kid to have a great education. Or in more extreme circumstances, you don't see how locking people down causes individuals to commit suicide. That's a particular story about it. Or how in this case, ignoring ICE retainers ends up resulting in people's murders. Politicians, they put their heads in the sand and ignore the facts of what their policy decisions lead to. That's why I've stayed so involved in politics. Well, so I posted what I posted about the Scott County Jail, and Cam Culbertson, the county attorney for Scott County, responded. Now remember exactly what I posted. I said, the KY Scott County Jailer Darren Boyles admits that up until a few months ago, they have been releasing convicted illegal aliens back in the community because the county attorney advised them to. And then I said it was because Cam Culbertson told him it was because of risk of lawsuits. But after calls from the community, they found a resolution. Cam Culbertson comments back and says, this is categorically false and ridiculous. Now, when you say something is categorically false and ridiculous, the only thing that I said that was factual in my post was that up until a few months ago, convicted illegal aliens were released back into the community. Darren Boyles, the jailer, said it was because the county attorney told them to, because they were afraid of lawsuits. And then the policy changed a few months ago. That's the only facts I said. Otherwise, it was my take on the facts. And this is a common thing we see from elected people. They will see something that is factually true, but they don't like the conclusions we came to. And now they'll try to muddy the waters by saying that is categorically false. They'll be like, oh, you're wrong. That's misinformation or disinformation. Here's the reason why. And then, and this is what's so frustrating, what they end up saying doesn't disagree with a single fact you stated. They just disagree with the opinion you have on the facts. I will say what Cam said and see if you see exactly what I'm talking about here, about them saying that something's false, even though the facts, as stated, they agree with. So they say this is categorically false and ridiculous. I have never advised anyone to release criminal illegal immigrants because of a risk of lawsuits. I've worked with Jailer Boyles and Judge Covington and consulted with Keiko's attorneys on the issue. Now pause. Those of you who, Keiko, right? Kentucky Association of County Attorneys, of county officers, that is a professional organization that they belong to. So remember what I said, that they arrived at this conclusion that they can't hold people in ICE detainers because of some associate. Cam doesn't know I said that because it was deep in my show and he didn't watch it. Those of you who would have taken the bet that $1,000 that some association that's unelected of people who are just hired on to shape policy somewhere are the ones who ended up creating the situation that was used and was able to shape policy all across our state, and we don't even know who these people are. Boom, right there. He admits to it there. Because he consulted with Keiko's, Kentucky Association of County Officers, attorneys on the issue. The Scott County Detention Center has the authority to house inmates incarcerated on state charges. When the Scott County Detention Center is aware that an inmate has an ICE holder, the detention center's protocol is to communicate with ICE. ICE is free to pick up inmates and transport them to a federal detention facility once they're released from their state charges. I'm told that ICE frequently does not do so. As of approximately November 2024, when inmates in the custody of Scott County Detention Center are released on state charges but have ICE holders, the jail will send those inmates to Oldham County, which the Scott County Fiscal Court has a contract with, which has a contract with the federal government to house inmates on ICE holders. The Scott County Fiscal Court, Judge Executive, and County Attorney and Jailer all support enforcing the law. Now, let me ask you, what I said was, once again, up until a few months ago, they've been releasing convicted illegal aliens back into the community. 100% true. Illegal immigrants, convicted of crimes, released back into the community. That is true. They may tell ICE to come pick them up, but ICE doesn't pick them up right away because they can't hold them for any length of time. Now, they could have had the agreement in place to send these ICE detainees to this federal or holding place that has the contract a while ago. They could have put this in place literally years ago, but they didn't. They waited until November 2024. So that's a few months ago. Agree with me there. They have been releasing convicted legal immigrants back into the community because they were advised to do so. They were told that Keiko's attorneys told them that if they hold people longer than their state charges, then they will face lawsuits. And they said, okay, well, I guess we just had to release them until people noticed it, called them, and then suddenly they found a solution where they could transfer them to Oldham County. So everything I said was true. They've been releasing illegal immigrants. County attorney did advise the jailer to do so. Then, and it was because of a risk of lawsuits, because the holding people passed their convicted time on state charges. Then after the community noticed, in November, they changed their policy. Now, he may not like the fact that I came to the conclusion that they're lazy do-nothings who only did this because they're worried about electoral consequences. And up until now, they've just been throwing their hands up, deciding to release these people who shouldn't even been there, that are already convicted of committing crimes, back into their community. And how that's a problem that has led to people's murder before in Scott County. But they say, look, you're ridiculous and false because, not because I disagree with the facts fall right in line, but because I don't like the conclusion you came to of blaming me and blaming the jailer and blaming elected people. It's nobody's fault. I mean, sure, we found a solution, but it was nobody's fault up until now. But this is what these elected people do. I see this all the time. Every time we're calling them out on them failing to do their jobs, somehow we just don't understand. I mean, they'll agree with the facts of the matter, but we just don't understand. So therefore, we're false, we're wrong, categorically false, crazy. Anyways, moving on from that, Beshear, spending on WEF came out. TJ Roberts, representative, did what, you'd think, some people within the government should have done, or other people within the Republican Party apparatus should have done, but he was able to get the request for authorization of out-of-state travel for 2 trips Beshear took, one to WEF and one to Spain, both there in January 16th through January 24th. Now, remember Beshear traveling there, he's talking all about the great things that he's doing by being able to pitch Kentucky to these businesses. And he was making that claim that this is to help Kentucky because obviously Kentucky, the Kentucky taxpayer, was paying for the trip. So let's go into exactly what he spent. So first, the trip to Spain, that was the 4 days prior to the WEF trip. So according to this, the expenses are for Governor Beshear, First Lady Brittany Beshear, Scott Ellis, and Coulter Minks. And so their request for 4 days of travel for 5 people, Jeff Knoll too as well falls into this. So those are 5 people. So their request for 4 days of travel for 5 total people is $36,450. First, they're staying at hotels, 4 people, 3 rooms. Really, I guess it'd be 4 people, 3 rooms at $450 a night for 4 nights for 1 person, $1,800, and then for 4 people needing 3 rooms is $450 a night for 3 nights at $4,050. So that comes to $22,000. So nobody's bunking together. Everybody's sharing, other than Brittany and Governor Beshear. Other than those 2, everybody else gets their own room at the cost of the taxpayer, $450 a night. Now, do you think Madrid, Spain has hotels that are cheaper than $450 a night? Yeah. But let's look at airfare here. Flights for 5 people, $22,000 for flights for 5 people. Now, I want you to keep in mind, too, that they flew from Kentucky, or wherever they flew from at airport, to Madrid, and then from Madrid to Davos, okay? Important to understand. So these flights here are most likely one-way flights, okay? So airfare, flights for 5 people, $22,000. That is more than $4,000 a person a ticket, all right? Right now, if I go on, let's say they flew out of Louisville to Madrid, March, we're going to do a short time frame too, because that'll certainly help pump it up. So the 1st through the 4th round trip per ticket, round trip economy is $1,200. Is like the economy average. Now they do have the cheapest from $844, but the best, looking at it, even if we go at the highest economy price, we're at $1244 a ticket. Okay? Now, however, if I change from economy from economy to premium economy for the flight, it's still only $2,000 a ticket round trip. Keep in mind, they flew most likely one way and then went to Davos afterwards. So how in the world did they spend over $4,000 a person when it's $1,000 round trip? Literally, I could buy the flights for 5 people for what they're accounting for one person. But hey, if it's not your money, right? And then to go to per diem. They said that they were spending on average $200 a day per person. So over the course of these 4 days for 4 of the people, and then a 5th day for one of the people, is $4,200. $1,000 a day. $1,000 a day for 5 people to eat. Mileage, $100. I guess that's driving to the airport. Airport parking, $300. And then a miscellaneous travel expense for $4,000. What is that for? No clue. Just miscellaneous travel expenses, $4,000. I mean, their foods and flights are taken care of, but you never know what else you might need a little extra grease for. Now, the justification for the trip, according to Jeff Knoll, who filled this out, is this. He says, Governor Beshear, First Lady Brittany, her real name's Brittany, but it's spelled weird, so I always say Brittany. Brittany Beshear, Secretary Jeff Knoll, Scott Ellis, and Coulter Minks are traveling to Madrid, Spain, at the invitation of the CEO of Aceronics, the parent company of North America Stainless. Aceronics has made major investments in Kentucky since 1990. The company employs around almost 1,700 people and operates 4.4 million square foot facility in Gent, Kentucky. The company has expanded 14 times over the years and announced a $244 million investment this past year. The CEO of Aceronics will host the governor in a series of meetings and events with more than 25 Spanish companies interested in investing in Kentucky. Estimated costs are for 5 travelers above. So $36,450 for a nice trip to Madrid for the Beshears and some key staff members, in order to supposedly pitch to some Spaniard companies to go ahead and invest in Kentucky. 25. And in order to do that, we have to go first class, the whole way, first class accommodations. And then after Madrid, Beshear headed on over to Davos, of course, the WEF. And now we have a new total here. So 4 days there were $36,450. Then he goes over to Davos. And then they fly, I guess, from Madrid to Davos and then Davos back to America. And for that airfare, they don't have anything. They're like, zero, I guess. So I'd say that their all-in trip from Madrid, so Kentucky to Madrid, Madrid to Davos and back home, I guess, was on the Madrid trip at the over $4,000 a person. But then you go to their hotel accommodation. So remember, in Spain, they were paying $450 a night, which we already thought was high. Well, when they went to Davos, I guess we should thank them for only spending $450 a night on a hotel room in Madrid, because when they went to Davos, they spent $2,000 per night for 5 rooms for 5 people. 4 rooms for 5 people at a grand total cost of $32,000. And we should thank them for only spending $200 a day for food, because when they were in Madrid, it was $200 a day. Now in Davos, apparently, it's 50% more expensive because now their per diem for meals went up to $300 a day. That would mean for Beshear and the First Lady, they were getting $600 a day. They got $3,000 alone just to eat from taxpayer funds. $3,000 over 5 days in taxpayer funds for them to stuff their faces. Mileage, $100. Registration fee, $500. Airport parking, $300. Weird they have airport parking, but no airfare, right? Miscellaneous travel expenses, another $4,000. That brings their total for WEF at $44,400. So the total cost of this 8-day vacation is over $80,000. And the justification for the WEF trip, as stated, is Governor Beshear is invited to present on panels at the annual World Economic Forum WEF. The WEF brings together leaders from more than 100 national governments, CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, major international organizations, and news outlets from around the world. The estimated costs for travelers is above. Interesting. So there you go. That's how your tax dollars is being wasted. But speaking of wasted funds, I think it's worthwhile for me at this point to bring up the TI-82 calculator situation. So I posted on social media there yesterday about how Kentucky is spending $16,000, that's right, $16,000 on 10 days of training on the TI-82 calculator. Here's the contract summary, okay? This contract here's on the Government Contract Review Committee's website, and this is the contract summary. Provide funds to train the districts and students on how to use the TI-82 calculator. Texas Instruments will provide 10 days of training total. Due to the number of Texas Instruments calculators purchased, Texas Instruments is providing 5 days of the 10-day training at no charge. Now, before we get into whether or not we should even have this calculator as a normal school expense in the first place, granted, I believe you can use it on the ACTs, but I think there's an overall conversation here about how useless this entire unless you personally somehow work in the fields, like a mathematics field where you need a graphing calculator, you need a TI-82 or 83 or 84 calculator. When have you ever seen one of these in the wild? After I've left school, I never once have seen anybody use one of these calculators. Or have I ever used one or ever needed one? Obviously, in the situations you need to use this calculator, you're doing some pretty high-level mathematics. Almost like it's kind of like a trade of sorts. And that leads me to my other point about this training and why I view it as so useless. It's not just that, the calculator is kind of, for most people, kind of useless. Requiring all these people to know how to use it is probably a monopoly that's being paid for by Texas Instruments in order to basically force the purchase of these calculators on people, because otherwise who would buy them? I could go into all that, but even putting that to the side, let's pretend for a second that the calculators are useful. People need to know how to use them, and it's incredibly important. Let's just pretend. If we're going to hire teachers to teach people how to use these calculators and the mathematics regarding these calculators, shouldn't they know how to use them? For an example, we wouldn't hire let's use a different trade, a welding teacher, to teach people how to weld that then needs to receive training from the welding machine manufacturers on how to operate a welding machine that we then have to pay for. I would assume, if you're going to hire somebody to teach the kind of mathematics that requires the use of the TI-82 calculator, they should know how to use the TI-82 calculator. Should they not? What are we hiring the teachers to do then? And then let's pretend, though, the TI-82's got new features, and there's all these features and things, and you do need to be taught it. Let's pretend that's the case. Okay. If they need updates to their training, YouTube does exist. You can right now go on YouTube and find videos of people showing you how to use the TI-82 calculator. And you don't need to shell out $16,000 to do it. That's why it's such a ridiculous waste. It's not just that we can question the use of the calculator, we can question if we need the calculator, we can question if it's helpful, but putting all that to the side, the teachers that we're hiring should know how to use the calculator and then teach students to use them. That's literally their job, to teach students to use this calculator. But, that might be a little too much common sense for our government to handle. Well, wrapping up here, we've seen some protests in Frankfurt this week. Of course, protesting Donald Trump, holding signs like "Impeach Donald Trump" at the State House, where they don't impeach Donald Trump. Of course, what they want to see is somehow a Republican legislature in a state that went, for Donald Trump by a massive majority to suddenly decide that they don't want to, they want to resist Donald Trump's policy agenda. That suddenly it's a problem. They need to resist it. They need to fight back against it. That's what they want. Of course, this is falling on deaf ears, but these types of demonstrations make those who are doing it feel better. They know they're not going to accomplish anything, but, they get to feel like they're part of the revolution and cosplay it. And a part of that, too, we've seen increase in protests. I talked about that Revolution KY protest that went on in Louisville, Lexington, and Bowling Green. Scantily attended, but it went on. And then also, I just saw an article about how Louisville's Democrat Socialism Party's membership has also seen a spike. And it's interesting to see this kind of, some people are worried about, I've seen some comments like, this concerns me about the growth of kind of communism, but I don't actually see that we're seeing communism grow. I don't think these are new converts to the idea. I think what we are seeing is those who are already militant about communistic ideas just being more outright and blatant about their beliefs and deciding to push it out there more. And I think that's actually a good thing for Republicans, because when we look at their ideas, we see that the American people have roundly rejected them. They literally look crazy. I mean, it's funny that there's no sense of self-looking and self-involvement when they see what they're fighting. For an example, right now at the national level, we see Democrats freaking out about some spending being addressed, such as this Politico spending, subscriptions. And they're really upset and trying to justify what has gone on in our federal government when it comes to just news subscriptions in general. And you could call it purposeful or not, but I think I know exactly what's happened to bring us to the point where we're paying $8 million to Politico for news subscriptions. Is that nobody shares their login, so somebody is through their job needs to be able to read articles that Politico put out or any newspaper's putting out. I bet you if we look at any news site or source that does any kind of user login protected content, we're going to find that the federal government's paying them millions of dollars in subscription fees. Because it's not their money, right? And so they end up, I want to read these articles, so I'm going to go ahead and sign up for this news subscription, pay for it. I don't share the login with anybody. I read the articles I need to read, and I either A, forget I ever paid for it, because once again, it's not my money, or B, I move on to a different position. Somebody takes over my position. They now need to be able to read Politico, and instead of, asking for a login, they just buy another subscription. And then, of course, those subscriptions auto-renew, and it ends up with a bunch of people who literally don't care, buying subscriptions to news services that never cancel them because it's not their money, and then end up not using them again because they move on, quit, fired, whatever. And then the new people come in and then they buy subscriptions, and other people in their department buy subscriptions because it's not their money. They could just pay for it on the company card, or in this case, the government card, on the taxpayer funds. I think that's in large part what's going on. And that really speaks to a mindset, but it's interesting that we see that the Democrats at the national level are like defending that spending kind of manically. And I think what it's doing is it's causing the average American to look at them and be like, why are you defending that spending? They just look ridiculous. They have no idea how to pick their battles. They have no idea to say, hey, yeah, that's out of control spending. I'm glad we're getting rid of it. I'm glad we're bringing attention to it. Democrats would do that, but we would keep these things. We wouldn't have to break things in the process. But instead, because, anything my enemy does must be incorrect, they're literally attacking things that, like, vast majority of Americans would agree is wasteful spending, and then trying to justify it. I think it's going to end up blowing up in their face. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. We'll be back here on Monday. I hope you have a great weekend.